What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 126 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barov, and I get to check off another huge box today. We've had coaches, we've had players, people with Olympic game experiences on this podcast. But today, I get to say that there's a Lombardi Trophy winner, not once, but twice. From 1984 to 1992, he played linebacker for the New York Giants, where he helped bring those two Super Bowls to the Meadowlands and is still synonymous with that big blue wrecking crew. His name is in the Ring of Honor. He's a member of the 1980s All-Decade team, and after recording 39 and a half sacks over 11 years in the NFL, he is now the president of G3 Sports, who's helping revive the starter and its iconic nostalgia brand. And lately, you've seen him courtside at St. John's games. It is truly my pleasure and my honor as a Giants fan to welcome to the podcast legendary Carl Banks.
David, thank you, man. It's an honor to be here.
Carl, you have said that you're a St. John's fan since day one.
Day
You're not a
one.
Johnny come lately.
I am not a Johnny come lately, man.
You got to
Um,
the Giants in 1984 at the height of Red Men basketball.
yeah,
I'm so curious, a little bit before my time, but what was it like to share the town with a red hot St. John's team? It was you, Phil Simms, Harry Carson, Lawrence Taylor, Coach Louis, Chris Mullen, Walter Berry, Mark Jackson, and
yeah.
Bill Wennington. I mean, what was the town like back then?
The town, like it was their town, right? It was, these are homegrown guys, right? So if you see Mark Jackson out, it was, out at dinner somewhere, he's going to come and give you a hug, but you felt like you belonged because, there's Mark Jackson and you're friends with Mark Jackson or Chris Mullen because they're New York, right? So having a guy, and then I don't know if you know the famous MTV personality Ed Lover, right?
Sure, of course.
Queens guy. Like that was New York to us. To be embraced by the New Yorkers made us feel like, okay, we're part of the fabric of what New York City embodies.
Did you cross paths at all with these guys like out and about? Like, you talk about it, and it, we're talking about a different time now. These days we try to the kids are kind of separated from like the celebrities, but back then, I mean, we're talking about the 80s. We have Walter Berry hanging out with Mike Tyson and Dapper Dan back then. So
Yeah.
like St. John's coming off a Final Four, might as well have been the Beatles, the Giants getting ready to win a Super Bowl. I mean, were you
Yeah.
guys crossing paths back then a lot?
And you had the New York Mets at that time too.
Right, of course, yeah.
So yeah,
Doc Gooden
we
in them.
we crossed paths. Obviously Walt's from Harlem, so that was the Dapper Dan thing. But again, just being able to see Mark Jackson, get a chance to know his family, it was just fun, man. Like Mark, I think when I came here, obviously I went to Michigan State, so Magic Johnson's my guy. I'm a
Mhm.
Spartan when I'm home. When I'm in New York, I'm St. John's unless we're playing each other, right? But I couldn't find good basketball. Like in 84, I'm drafted. Magic Johnson, had brought a championship like 3 years prior to that. So I know basketball, Big Ten basketball. I didn't know anything about like Big East basketball, but I knew good basketball when I saw it, right? And so, I'm flipping through, not really big on Rutgers, not really big on Seton Hall. And then this St. John's team, man, it was just like, Coach Louis was, animated and the players, they were playing a style of basketball, right? It was, you know, you got Detroit basketball, you got Chicago basketball, you got New York basketball, right? And I'm not slighting any other regions, but the inner city basketball that you come to know, and you hear so much about, like me coming from Michigan, the St. Cecilia Center in Detroit, right? But you hear so much about legends of New York and the point guards and this, that, and the other, and you get here and you see Mark Jackson in person and he's doing his thing, and the battles that he had with Pearl and those guys, rest in peace, but it was just fun watching Big East basketball and just St. John's in particular because it was home. And then I got a chance again to really be embraced and to embrace the city through a sports lens, right? Through the basketball lens. I got a chance to feel the vibe of, what New York City basketball was all about. And that was through St. John's.
It's super cool to see because you obviously have such a different perspective on things. You come from it from a football side of it, but you come from it from an athlete side of it. Then you're coming from Michigan. You're a Spartan, as you mentioned. By the way, you got to get Tom Izzo on the phone. Let's get St. John's and Michigan State at the Garden. Let's make that happen.
Listen, you're gonna pull at my heartstrings, man. I'll be wearing a split jersey or something.
That would be dope. But you come from it from a different perspective. You talk about like you're sitting at home, you're sitting at the hotel on a road game or something, you're flipping through the channels and you're looking for what's going to grab you. What was it about that St. John's team that made you stop and grab you instead of staying on a Rutgers or a Seton Hall back then?
See, again, you have to understand when you come from a region known for basketball, right? You know good basketball when you see it, and then you just see basketball being played, right? And there was just a style, there was a cadence to St. John's basketball during that period, and you just kind of felt it, right? It makes you sit up and you're like, oh wow, look at yeah. And so you knew you were watching New York's team, right? And I grew up also a Knicks fan, believe it or not, because my brother and I were Earl and Clyde, we thought. But like New York basketball, like when you were in 1985, and I'm not even a full year in New York, still feeling my way around, right? Trying to understand the vibe of New York. And, if you can experience that through the lens of St. John's basketball and the players that they had, just unbelievable, man. It was incredible because again, being friends with folks like Isaiah Thomas and Mark Aguirre and Magic Johnson, Jay Vincent, Herb Williams, all these guys were friends of mine, Doc Rivers, right? Um, and seeing good basketball up close and personal, and then coming here and like, where do they play basketball in New York? Is there any good college sports, right? I knew it was Knicks and Nets, but I'm like, do they have good college sports? And they didn't at the time in New Jersey, right? In New York, it was undisputable, undeniable. Like it was something about St. John's that made you sit up. And when you love it, you love it. And so I just never deviated from that moment on.
I know the football season sort of overlaps with the college basketball season, but did you ever find yourself like, were you able to get to the Garden to see these some of these great teams back then?
Yeah, I got a chance to see them up close and personal. Actually, also at Carnesecca, and I didn't even really have a plug at that time, right? It was kind of your PR person at your team called the SID at the college, and they're like, "Okay, talk to this person. I'll get you in at the Garden." And it was all good though. It was cool, and it was, no frills. You go in and you enjoy it, and you just root for the people.
1986, 1987 season when you won your first Super Bowl with the Giants. St. John's was just coming off the Final Four, winning
Mhm.
the Big East tournament. You guys win the Super Bowl on January 25th, 1987. The day before, St. John's lost to number seven Syracuse by 1 point. So you guys, I don't know if you know this, but you guys helped bring New York spirits back up because that was a huge loss. I
Yeah.
wasn't alive back then, but I'm always fascinated about how on fire New York was back then. You mentioned the Mets; they were winning the World Series. Giants win the
Mhm.
Super Bowl. St. John's is dominating college basketball, and the Knicks are building around
Oh, the
Patrick
Knicks were
Ewing.
fun. Yes, the Knicks
Yeah,
were fun. Yes.
they were on the way. They were on the way up. Still not great, but
Yeah.
you saw the makings of what
Yep.
was happening. Um, at that time, after you guys won, like. again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I'm just the melting pot of New York sports and of greatness that is just happening at that time for yourself personally with the Giants and everything. I mean, just did it feel like the New York was the center of the universe of sports and you were like literally just you had the whole everybody else was just looking at you guys?
Yeah, New York continues to be the center of the sports universe, whether they're
Whether
winning
we're
or
winning or not.
losing. Yeah, but it's, it is the heartbeat, of sport. And, I've been to a lot of sports towns and, I spent 2 years in Cleveland, and there's not a better sports town that lives and dies for their teams, but it's just not the same vibe. I mean, New York is a vibe, man, because there's so many things that people can do on a daily basis and so many sports that they can watch, right? You got three hockey teams in the area, two basketball, and then all the basketball, college basketball teams. But it's like here, it's like when they say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. It's so true, man. I don't know what it is about it. Um, but when you win in this town, they embrace you, right? And being embraced by someone from this town, like Mark and Chris, was even more of a feeling. It was when you felt like you belonged in the New York sports scene. Like you weren't a guy that just popped in, did your thing, became a superstar, and just left, or you just pranced around, right? Like New York sports, especially from a time where the players that grew up here were fans of yours and you were a fan of theirs, you felt like they kind of brought you in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of said, okay, we'll adapt you. You're part of us, right? And so that was the most beautiful part about being in New York. And you ran into everybody. See, it's so different now because people have camera phones and they're looking for angles and things of this nature. We would see each other all the time, like in restaurants, just going out. It wasn't, the club scene was the club scene. Um, and thankfully there were no cameras back then, but but it was we would run into each other, Broadway, different restaurants. It was all love, man.
A few years after those years, St. John's was, still on the way up. Lou Carnesecca was still winning with
Mhm.
this team, and in came Boo Harvey and somebody that I know you're very close to, of course, the late great Malik Sealy. What was your
Yes.
relationship like with Malik? Obviously, Malik was a very eccentric guy, not only on the basketball court, but off of it. Started dabbling in movies and, of course, fashion. We know, and yeah, Malik was just a elite, all-time great at St. John's, and unfortunately had a shortened career in the NBA. But I know that Malik is somebody that you knew well.
Yeah, Malik and his wife. They were in the fashion business. I had just started maybe 2 years into building my G3 Sports collection, which was at that time doing leather coats, leather team apparel, and fashion apparel. And I think my partner at the time, Michael Cohen, introduced me to Malik and said he's interested in ties and silk fabrics and things of that nature. And so we spent time together, right? And just I'm new, I'm new to the industry, but I had a lot of experience in what not to do, right? And so a lot of that we talked about people he should know, people he shouldn't know, people he should stay away from, because athletes are always targets. They've always been targets. So, and then just learning, and it also helped that Malik was a smart person, right? So he kind of understood, he wasn't blindly walking into the fashion industry. He had a point of view. He knew what he wanted to get accomplished. And so that was pretty cool.
Earlier this year, on October 8th, you were at Madison Square Garden checking out the St. John's practice, and then you set social
Yeah.
media on fire when you gave Rick Pitino the Navy St. John's starter jacket that you have now said it's not going to be called Navy. We're calling it the Patino Blue.
Patino blue. You got Carolina blue. Now you got Patino blue. That's that starter blue because it wasn't even a very uh, popular jacket. It was kind of rare. The brand, and I'm a day one starter guy too. When they first came into sport, I was one of their first endorsers. So I kind of lived the brand and how it has been a part of pop culture and sports. But yeah, so that blue was kind of not. It was kind of the one you wanted because you couldn't get it. And it's kind of like in the Giants, there's we call it the Belichick red jacket. It was this red jacket that Bill Belichick wore on the sideline because this was before helmet communication and wristbands. So if the games got chaotic, we knew he said, I'll be in the red jacket. And that's how we knew where to get our signals from. Um, and so our opponents didn't know that's why he always wore the red jacket. But that, he was our signal caller. And if we're in 2-minute drill or something, and we got to hurry up and get a call in, you just look for the red jacket. So, but the story behind the blue is like, when I never owned one, I had the red one, right? But I always wanted the blue one and could never get it and there was another one that I could never get was the Hartford Whalers. They had two different colorways of the Hartford Whalers, and I couldn't get the other colorway. It just hard to find. And I knew, the founder of Starter, David Beckerman, well, and he's just like they keep going and they don't make a lot of them. But I was able to find one later on in life, and so I said once I got the IP for the starter brand, I'm like, I'm gonna make sure these stay special.
So obviously everybody is talking about this still, but on that day you went to practice. You talked to the team. I know you saw the team afterwards. There's that a shot of you in the huddle with the guys. I'm curious what you kind of told them to get ready for this season. Obviously from your championship mentality, because whatever you said is working. Johnny's are 9-2 right now to start the season.
I wish it was something I said. They got great coaching, man. Half of that huddle was Coach Pitino reciting all of my stats and telling people how much of a part of New York sports I am. And he's a New Yorker, so he knows and he's friends with the Giants ownership. And I just told him I'm just thrilled to be a Johnny's fan. I told him I wasn't a Johnny come lately. I'm day one. And we also have an initiative with St. John's, the starter brand, with their NIL collective, right? So a lot of what we're doing in um, bringing back some of the classics for St. John's, it's all about building their NIL as well because it's a new way of life in sport, and we want to make sure that the Johnnies can keep some talent at home or get some talent from somewhere else, right? So part of that initiative, because I've always had the license to produce college apparel. And so I was like, I want to take this a step further with St. John's. It's my team. And, Matt and I had a conversation. He made a conversation with my team, and we talked about how, we could do more and bring more visibility to St. John's just through doing what we do, right? And so just bringing back some of the classics. And I have a whole vault of St. John stuff and, making
Carl,
sure that
don't start teasing us.
what
Don't
we
start
talking about?
teasing us, man.
What
Look
we
at
talking
this.
about?
Look at
What we
this.
talking about?
If you're
Wait,
watching, I know.
wait, wait.
Here we
What
go.
we
You guys
talking
got to
about
watch
right
the
here?
YouTube. Look behind him. Look
What
look
we
behind
talking
Carl.
about? That's the
Look, we got
truth right
legends.
there.
We got
And
legends.
so we have some fun stuff planned, right? For January 7th, I think we're doing a campus only drop. Shameless plug, but it's for the Johnny fans.
Oh,
We're
it's not
doing a
shameless. Well, we plugging.
we're dropping this vintage one right here. And we have another one but this is another classic starter from the vault. But this will be a campus only for the Butler game. I think we're going to do a pop
That's
up
January 4th.
January 4th, right?
It's January
Um,
4th. Johnny fans first, the first drop from Carl and the starter
yeah,
Johnny's
we have
band.
a
That's
couple other pieces that are going to drop with that, but this is the main piece that's
okay.
coming.
All right, the
So
Felipe
everybody can have it.
era Red Storm
Yeah.
logo, red brim, white hat. For those that are not watching on YouTube, but you guys come have to check that out. All right, Carl, we got to talk. We got to talk about all the starter stuff. You're teasing us, so we'll get there in a second. But Rick Pitino, you talked about him, knows the Giants ownership, obviously a legend beyond legend in college basketball, and Johnny fans very grateful that he is putting a capstone on his career as the head coach here at St. John's. You're obviously somebody that knows about winning at the highest level imaginable, and we talked about that huddle, and I know you're telling that Rick was just talking about you and your accolades, but
Mhm.
from that perspective, you talk about the Giants every week. I'm sure you talk to a lot of the young guys on the team. What are some of the qualities that you think you both share? Obviously yourself, Rick Pitino, just the sharing of knowledge, and how do you go on about passing that to young players in order for them to reach their abilities and hopefully get to that next level?
So I think just it was just a lot of fun watching Coach Pitino in the Garden with that open practice because it's a lot. He's very similar to a lot of the other great basketball and football coaches that I've gotten to know. I've gotten to know Coach Bobby Knight. I've gotten, obviously very close with Bill Parcells. And the one thing that I noticed is right away teaching, not coaching. He's teaching, right? And so I know that's the part that a coach does, right? What does a guy who's been a pupil of a coach or a teacher like a Patino or a Parcells or a Bobby Knight, you impart on kids the importance of fundamentals, right? Paying attention to details. You don't win championships unless you're detail oriented, right? Um, and I think the Kansas State game, the Johnnies didn't miss a field goal, and they didn't miss a free throw until late in the fourth quarter, right? And I'm like, that's attention to detail, right? And it just, you just look at the fruits of their labor and the they take on good teaching, right? They're accepting teaching. And he doesn't, there are some coaches who can't coach these players today because they think these players don't want to be coached hard. They do. Players want to be coached hard. They just got to believe that you're authentic in what you're doing, right? And so if I have conversations, and I do with a lot of the young players, it's about being accountable to yourself and to your team, but always looking to grow, right? It's so easy now for athletes, and we see it in every sport. Whatever they are when they came in the league is what they'll be 5 years later. I didn't come from that era, right? I came from an era where they said Magic Johnson couldn't shoot a jump shot, and he went home and came back the next year flushing jumpers, right? Um, come from an era where they were saying Isaiah Thomas was too small, he's going to get banged up. And knowing he's a Chicago kid anyway, he wasn't backing down to anybody. But it's like, they tell you can't go left, right? These guys, that era, they worked on the things that they weren't very good at. Same thing, they said a lot of things about Mark Jackson too, right? Oh, he's a passer, but he won't be able to play at an NBA pace because he's so slow. Look, he played a lot of years and was very, very good. Um, but these are things that I impart on young athletes now. What you are today, you shouldn't be next year. What you should be next year is what you weren't very good at this past year, and people were talking about it. I don't care. And, with basketball players, and you see it, they go home and work on the same things, right? Football players, you see the same workout videos, right? And then they all have the same issues when the season starts. because you didn't work on anything other than what you were good at. And your opponent is not going to let you be good at what you're good at. They're going to force you to be what you're bad at. And so, in order to be a complete player, you have to continue to work on those areas.
Carl, your Twitter timeline is basically all Giants and St. John's content. We've
Yeah,
seen you courtside almost every game this year. There's plenty decked out in that Patino blue jacket or that other starter sweater that everybody keeps hitting me up. And Dave, when is Carl releasing that? So, but we've seen you're showcasing the starter for everybody, and we're waiting for it. I've been begging and pleading here for that red St. John's starter jacket. I can't wait for that to come out. I need that more. I've been looking for that for literally decades at this point. But
you will
before we
have the
get
first one off the pile. I
before
promise you.
thank you. Before we get to that, I preface it by you being courtside, and I'm curious from your perspective because for St. John's lately, it's been about building the brand back up. That was the Rick Pitino hire, why it was so important, why it's so important to capitalize right now on Rick Pitino's tenure here and to start winning in order to rebuild the brand too when you were first obviously playing, and so that we don't have to keep talking about St. John's in the past tense. For yourself, for guy, we've had Kevin Durant was came to a game at St. John's. We've seen plenty of other celebrities come to St. John's over the last 2 years. But for yourself, why is it important to show that support front and center and do it on such a consistent basis?
Because we have to support our local teams. We want our players to feel the love from the city, right? You don't want to be a team that's playing in New York and nobody knows about you, right? Or you're doing good things and it's kind of an old afterthought. Like St. John's is a brand, right? And the St. John's brand has always meant something in New York. I mean, and I say this and I hope I'm saying it the right way because I grew up in Flint, Michigan, a blue collar town. St. John's is a blue collar. That's the school of the people, right? That's the school of the people of New York. So I am a firm believer that you have to be supportive because these are the kids that grew up and they're playing for you, right? And they established the foundation of what this brand of basketball is about. So I think it's important. Like we got the Knicks, right? We know what they are, but we also have this school in town called St. John's, and they got a little something going on, and it's a great brand, and it's been, and your hometown heroes are the ones who built this brand. They didn't go anywhere else to do it, right? Mark, Malik, uh, Mullen. It's so. I mean, these were Walter Berry. Like these are guys that stayed home. They chose New York and said, we're going to put New York on the map. And they put St. John's on the map, and it has an indelible mark. And the reason it has that is because you got this group of kids from New York that went to the Final Four, right? And yeah, it was three Big East teams in the Final Four, but nobody really thought this group is going to do well. We did, we expected it, but like on a national scale, like everybody knew about New York. And then when you look at the players that left St. John's to go on to play professional football, I mean basketball, listen, that tells you a lot. And we're not talking about role players either. We're talking about star players that played at St. John's that went to the NBA the next level and became stars as well. So, I think that's why it's important.
All right, Carl, you've been teasing us. Post a lot of the retro St. John's starters swag. The satin jacket, I'm talking about the red one. Now we know there's a blue one, the Patino blue. All right. The hat, you've teased the navy hat and that hat that you just showed us as well, the
Mhm.
white with the retro logo. You've shown some hoodies. What can St. John's fans expect from Starter? What's the timeline for everything?
Okay.
What you got for us? Let's go. Give it to us. The fans
I'm
are
in,
listening. They got the
so
wallets out, man. They ready.
I'm in the vault, right? And I'm just waiting for opportunities. Obviously, there's some stuff with Redmond on it that we have to change to Red Storm. So there'll be an alteration. But before I even do that, I just want your listeners to know that Starter is part of the legacy of the Big East. There's not one conference, and Starter made some incredible jackets that people from all over the world would wear, but they would be singular. Like people would have Carolina if they lived in, or Charlotte if they lived in, some other part of the country. But there's no conference that moved culture more than the Big East because Georgetown was hot, right? One of the
Hmm.
hottest jackets.
Definitely.
Providence, Providence, UConn, um, St. John's, like Villanova. Those were all like hardcore starter brands because number one, they had very good coaches, very colorful coaches, right? And those are some of the top coaches in basketball. But Starter was part of that, right? And being part of pop culture and sport, obviously, my heart's with St. John's. And so I'm like, I'm gonna introduce him every piece we got, because that's part of what you were talking about, and why it's important to support the local team, right? I'm here because I want everybody in New York wearing St. John's jackets, right? I want them to feel the energy coming out of Queens or coming out of the Garden, by the time the Big East tournament comes around, that it's buzzing, right? It's all about St. John. So, and that being said, we are doing a Beast of the Big East collection, which I'm paying homage to the great teams that were in the Big East, and there's still some great teams in the Big East now. But some of the vintage retro stuff that a lot of our audience now just are just getting introduced to, like the starter satin jacket, which was the most iconic. But we have that collection, which is every piece in that collection is an original starter piece. So as you can see over here, right, the truth, and we're reintroducing it. We're reissuing this. Um, we have on the 4th this hat. This is a campus only, right? But during the Big East tournament, this is the big deal. We partnered with Macy's, and we're taking over Macy's in Herald Square because everybody's in town. So we're launching a 5-piece collection, with headwear at Macy's around every Big East team. And so some of your favorite St. John's players will be wearing it. Some of the legends of St. John's are going to participate in kind of a roundtable talk. We're going to do some activations in store, so we're going to just constantly have things going on during the Big East tournament. But we're launching that at Macy's Herald Square during the Big East tournament. And that's where you're going to get it, and we're going to tease a few pieces, and we may you know, push a few pieces out there, let people get, some early access. But I'm excited about it.
I'm excited too. Time to
Oh, and
line
by
up
the
that
way,
uh
the Patino blue jacket will not be in
oh,
that
is
drop.
that's a St. John's fans exclusive only.
The red piece that everybody still doesn't have. We have that one. But the blue one is kind of rare. We're gonna keep it the way it was. We're gonna keep it rare, and we'll have some drops on campus only. Do some stuff for the real St. John's fans.
I love that. Love that. Carl Banks, I know that it was recently announced that you, as well as fellow Giant greats Charlie Connolly and OJ Anderson, made it to the next stage of the voting process to get inducted
Mm,
into the 2025 NFL Hall of Fame in the seniors category. I speak for all of the St. John's fans and the Giants fans when you should absolutely be in Canton. We are absolutely rooting for you as well as all of the Giants. But you're our guy. You are a Johnny from day one. And so,
appreciate it.
absolutely rooting for you for that. And I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Johnny Nation, that's Carl Banks taking you down a little bit of memory lane, taking you down all the good stuff that is coming thanks to Starter and St. John. So make sure you keep your eyes out. Make sure you're following Carl on social. He is posting all about the Johnnies, man. He is liking, retweeting, posting. He's at the game.
No
So
doubt.
you're gonna catch him for sure. Johnny Nation, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.